Yeah.
I tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.
Well, now we're continuing on with our errors in sentences, and I think this particular concept is going to be a little easier than the rest. Well, I won't say easier, but it's definitely it's definitely more interesting, if not anything else. It can be complicated, just like a lot of the concepts, but I think if you get the basis of this, it will not be complicated at all. But I personally think that understanding this concept, it has more to do with identifying it than it does with actually applying it in your own writing. Of course, you need to do both, but if you're looking at this for the SAT, then you're probably going to get the most benefit out of this particular lesson here. So let's just begin. Okay, so we're talking about understanding parallel structure, and in understanding parallel structure, we need to keep in mind the whole time that things need to be alike in sentences when we're talking about more than one thing. They need to be alike. But just for the sake of having our own definition, parallel structure involves putting together elements of similar structure. That's what I mean when I say things need to be alike. In other words, if you have, and I want you to look at it this way, because if you look at it this way, then it'll be easier to understand the rest of what we're going to say. When you're dealing with parallelism, you're dealing with lists, a list of something. And a list can be two or more items. Okay? Now, grammatically, when you're writing something, a sentence, and you or it can be not a sentence, it can be sentences in a paragraph, whatever the case is. When you're writing something, you need to include that thing in a list form, and it has to be correct, meaning all of the items in the list must match. If they don't match, then of course you're not going to achieve parallel structure. Sorry for the misfocus. Someone was knocking on the door. Okay, so here it is. Similar parts in a sentence, two or more, must have the same structure. Meaning that in other words, if one of the items has a grammatical structure, say for instance it begins with a preposition, then the other item in this list needs to also begin with a preposition. And I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself here by being specific. But to make it seem a little more simplistic, parts are comparable and balanced, flow smoothly. This is what it's supposed to do when everything is in order or parallel in a sentence. Okay, because if they're not parallel, if they're not in the same grammatical structure, confusion can take place, and this is what we're trying to avoid, because if there is confusion, then of course we know we have a parallel issue, and we can also look at that as termed a faulty parallelism. Okay, so similar structure. We must use similar structures to express similar ideas, of course. And those similar ideas can basically be understood as similar grammatical concepts. In other words, if you have a list of nouns, then you don't want to have the list mixed with nouns and verbs. Okay, you need to have nouns with nouns. For instance, I enjoy basketball more than playing video games. Okay, so we need to make sure that the structure of the word or the phrases, if we're talking about nouns, then both of them need to be in that structure, noun structure. Okay, play of course can be a verb, but when we add ing to it, we turn it into a gerund, which of course it becomes a noun with nouns. If you're going to make a list and you're going to use nouns, you need to make sure every item in that list is in fact a noun. I enjoy basketball more than playing video games. Well, here we have a noun, but what comes after it is, of course, a phrase. Now, we can probably consider that a noun phrase, but the problem is we need a one-word noun because we started with a one-word noun. And although we can use an adjective with the noun, and we wouldn't consider that as a phrase, but we can't use the playing video games because that, of course, is definitely a phrase, and we can't do that. So we need to break it down to one word, and here we have our two nouns. Items in a series. Items in a series. Now, when you have a series of items, of course, we're talking about when we present two or more things and we join them with our words that indicate a series like and or. We must use the same form. Now here we're going a little bit deeper here because if we're connecting phrases, we need to use phrases. If we're connecting words, we need to use words. And of course, if we're connecting clauses, we need to use clauses. Let's look at this sentence. I am doing well in my English class, in my math class, and in history. Now, here is our list. And in a series, we have in my English class, we have, that's number one. Number two, in my math class. And number three, in history. Well, that's a problem. Simply because where's class? We have class in each one of these phrases, but we don't have it in the last phrase. So we have a choice here. We can either take class out of the first two or put class in the last one, but they all should contain class, and it should sound like this. I am doing well in my English class, in my math class, and my history class. Yes, excellent. Yeah, no. This time we were missing in. I mean, we put class there, but we took in out. So if we want to do that, then we need to take in out the first two, or we can put in where it's supposed to be. And let's look at the correct sentence now with all its parallelism glory. I am doing well in my English class, in my math class, and in my history class. So now we have our three items. They are all in the sentence properly with full parallelism glory. So this, of course, we can consider this sentence as good. Let us continue here. Comparisons. In comparisons, the item being compared must, of course, be in parallel structure. That's going to cause confusion if it is not. For instance, driving to Austin is as fast as to fly. So here we're comparing two things. We're comparing, I guess, driving to Austin to, what are we comparing it to? I guess we're comparing it to fly. Well, let's look at this better sentence. Driving to Austin is as fast as flying. Well, the problem is that what was making it sound awkward, well, I mean, we got the idea, but it was still awkward, and that's what we're trying to correct, the awkwardness, because it can also lead to not being clear. We needed the same form as we had in the first item in the list, which was driving. So driving to Austin needed to be complemented with another ing word, and since we can change to fly to an ing word, flying, then that's definitely what we needed to do. Let's look at that point again. Buying textbooks is almost as expensive as tuition. Well, the problem is how can you compare buying textbooks with tuition? We can't do that. So we have to add, again, we have to add the same kind of word at the beginning of that second item as we had in the first. Buying textbooks is almost as expensive as paying tuition. So now we have our complete, of course, sentence here with all its parallelism glory, of course. Textbooks are almost as expensive as tuition. We can, of course, change it that way also. Now, words. Now, paired words. When we're putting words together in a sentence, we're trying to join or use them to join items, we must make sure they are parallel. For instance, my history course is both interesting and a challenge. No. We need to, in this case, we need to make sure we add, here we go again, the second item in the same form. My history course is both interesting and challenging. So here we're using this word but we need to make sure that when we use this word and whether it's a correlative conjunction or just a regular conjunction, we know we have a list when we're talking about and. We know we have we know we're going to have two things or more in a sentence. So we need to be on the lookout to make sure all those items in that, and I want to call it what we called it at the beginning, a list. We want to make sure all those items in that list have the same form. In this case, we're talking about the ing. So interesting and challenging is what we need, and not interesting and a challenge. Okay? You must either make a C in the course or taking it again will be the consequence. So let's look at this. Will be the consequence is the problem area. You must either make a C in the course or take it again. Take it again. And the reason why we needed take is because we had make. See, we didn't say either making a C. We said either make a C. So make a C, take it again, definitely will make it parallel. So, I mean, you know, of course, taking and take, although they are two different kinds of words, which you should be able to identify, one a verbal and the other a verb, you still, even without knowing that, you can hear the awkwardness of that particular error, and it should be pretty easy to correct. I would rather work hard and pass than to repeat the course. Well, of course, to repeat is going to be the problem. I would rather work hard and pass than repeat the course. To repeat, we could only use to repeat if we had two, yes, if we had two pass. If we had two pass before it, but we didn't. We only had pass. Yes. Okay, so I think you're kind of getting the idea here. I mean, it's not like it's rocket science. Whenever you have a list of items, they all need to be in the same form. Okay, so I'm going to skip a few of these because I want you to enjoy the SCORM activity, or you probably already went over the SCORM activity. So, but there is some I do want to talk about, like improper conjunction. For instance, he had lost his job, but his sense of identity was also gone. Here, of course, we have the conjunction but, and the problem is we can't use but. We need to use a correlative conjunction to create the proper form here. He had not only, he had lost not only his job, but also his identity. This lets us know that this was in addition to what came before it, but of course we're still talking about two items in the list here, so we need to make that very clear that we are discussing two items in the list. Let's look at another sentence, and I think that's probably all we're going to look at. When he wasn't depressed, he was angry with us, himself, and total strangers. Well, of course we know we have a problem here. And this is a little different than what we've been talking about before, because now we're talking about climatic order. And in climatic order, it's usually going to be, especially when you're dealing with yourself, it's usually going to be yourself out or yourself in. But I think it's usually going to be this way, coming in, because it's getting closer. So when you're talking about climatic order, you're talking about bringing that list closer to yourself. He wasn't depressed. He was angry with strangers, with us, and then with himself. And you can kind of get an idea of this climatic thing which ends with this. So, okay, so we're going to continue on here. I want you to be able to go over the SCORM activity okay, so why do we even need parallel structure? Because, of course, it makes the writing clear. It helps. It also helps the reader to understand the list that you are creating. Now, whether that list is in a sentence or outside of the sentence, when all the items in that list are correctly placed in that list, it just makes it easier, the points that you're making with that list, of course. So, parts of a sentence, headings in a report, items in a resume, bulleted lists, so forth and so on. All of these you need to ensure that you're using proper parallel structure for. For instance, I left my job for several reasons. And now we're going to make a list of reasons because, of course, we have the colon there, and that usually indicates that something is about to come in the list. The pay was poor, long hours. I found the work tedious. Well, we're not going to put the list like that because we have almost 3 different formats here, and we need to make them all, 4 now. Equipment was dangerous. We have 4 different formats, but we need to make them all the same in order to make it clear and to get our point across better. Here is a better way to do it. I left my job for several reasons: poor pay, long hours, tedious work, and dangerous equipment. So here we made sure that we began all of them with an adjective describing the particular thing that we're mentioning. Here we didn't do that. Some of them we use the pronoun, and some of them we use a noun, and a whole, in some cases, a whole clause. But we can't do that. In order to make it clear to the reader, we need to make sure we use the same format. Same thing goes with headings, and you can look over that with the SCORM. I didn't really want to rush this, but I didn't think it needed a whole lot of time. I think that probably the main focus here for you to remember is when you have a list and when you're using it in a sentence, you need to make sure that that list or all the items in that list have the same grammatical structure. If you do not make sure they have the same grammatical structure, then of course you're going to end up with a situation where you have faulty parallelism. And keep on the lookout for that, especially when you see and or one of the other connector words that create lists or correlative conjunctions that create pairs. You need to make sure that the things in those pairs all have the same form, and that's going to be it for us for this particular concept. Thank you very much.
In Islamic school. I'll talk about tomorrow.
That's rolling the hard way. We don't want to roll quite that hard. We want to get one of them little minibuses.
Welcome to the newtimeflash.com. Welcome to the newtimeflash.com.
Oh yeah. All right. Check this out.
I would not be asking any one of you to take this leap if I did not have complete faith in your ability to succeed. Your courage will never be more needed than it is today.
I tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.